Hello, hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Tasha. Today we have Dr. Tasha Becton with us today, and I'm extremely excited to have you here. Really looking forward to our chat today. We have some really great questions that came in. Before I let you introduce yourself, I'm going to share my screen really quick and
Okay.
do quick announcements about the Vacc. Um, so for those that I know you probably see me and hear me saying this every single time. Actually, I did the wrong screen. We have a couple of reminders. One of them is don't forget that we have the community clothing exchange at the back. If there's anything that you need, anything that you want, like there's just a closet at the back with clothing that people have been donating. Feel free to come in and take a look at what we have. I think we have as small as like extra small and as large as like 2X. So feel free to come in and just browse around. If there's something that you think may be like someone else it may be a good use for someone else, like feel free to come in and also drop off some stuff. And then the other reminder is that we have the refueling station. If you need a snack, if you forgot like a meal and need something, there may be some stuff at the back of the Vacc that you can just come in. It's a take what you need, leave what you can. So if there's something that you would like to bring in for other students, you're welcome to do so as well. And this is not the first time that this has happened at Chats at the Back. So you'll probably meet, if you haven't met Remy, this is Remy. And then the last announcement is that I think next week already, we will be welcoming Dr. Camila Pulgar, and she will be talking about suicide prevention. So, and in a couple of weeks, we'll have Carolina Guisar, a dietitian, and she'll be talking about nutrition and mental health. So, really excited for those. And with that, like, Tasha, please introduce yourself. Yeah, I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah. So, hey, y'all, I am Dr. Tasha Becton. I am a double Spartan, like Spartan spirit, like let's go G. Undergraduate alum as well as a PhD alum from the counselor education program. And I'm really excited to be here, be with y'all. So what do I do? Who am I? Like, I'm a local, like of the Triad area. So I grew up in Winston-Salem and I live here in Greensboro. I've been in Greensboro for 22 years, which is like, bruh, like that's a lot. It's a long time to say. It's really interesting to me sometimes when I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like over a decade ago, or that was 2 decades or 3 decades ago. Like I have reached an age where I can say those things. So that's pretty amusing to me every time I think about it. I am very much a professional counselor. That's a big part of my professional identity as well as my personal identity. And I don't know what else I want to say about that. Besides that, I have a practice here in Greensboro, warfare counseling, consulting, and supervision, where my preference is to focus on supervision and consulting. And I also happen to have several clinical clients, most of whom are Black women. I see other people also, but a lot of Black professional women come to see me because they want a person that looks like them and has similar experiences. So I get to do that. I also have the privilege of training counselors, of teaching in a counselor education program at North Carolina Central University. So those are kind of like my professional things. And I should say, actually, let me go back. So a professional counselor, that's a part of my identity. I am a counselor educator, and my specialty areas are addictions, ethics, and supervision. So those are things that you'll hear me get excited about or be up in arms about if that is what is necessary. Personally, I very much identify as a Black woman. My pronouns are she and her. I prefer Dr. Becton. You might see my name is Hicks Becton. Sometimes Dr. Becton is my preference. And I got a kid, a 9-year-old who's pretty awesome. I love that joker. I guess I'll keep the kid and a spouse. And we like to be outside and have fun. So I don't know what else I should say, but here we are. Yeah.
We'll get into all the things. You do all the things. And I think that's the thing. That's what I remember putting in the flyer when we were trying to figure out, okay, what are we doing this Chats at the Back about? And it ended up being of like, ask me anything type of thing. Because you have so many hats, you have so many roles. And I guess that may be a great place to start. One of the questions that one of the students submitted were, like, how do you juggle parenting and like the many other roles? Because you're
Very
right, you're an
quickly.
educator, you're a supervisor, you're a counselor, like
Mhm.
you're a parent, like you're a partner, like you do all the things. Like, how do you just
Yeah, so real talk, like it's hard. It's a very challenging thing to do. And my kid is hilarious. I wish the kid were here because they would probably tell you how much they jazz around with me about that. And they say, Mommy, like you're really good at parenting and that's your hardest job. And I think that's just so sweet. So sweet. So if you've ever met my kid, what you'll know is that they are pretty hilarious. They have a lot of jokes and they spend a lot of time with adults. So their perspective is very interesting, and they talk about how amazing their critical thinking skills are. So that's what I'll say about that. But ultimately, it's about deciding what's important. And I am really clear about what my priorities are. And they might be changing from day to day. You know, so sometimes I'm saying to the kid, hey, I have something that I need to work on and I really need to focus on this today. And that means that I won't get to spend this much time with you, or I can only spend X amount of time with you, or I know you want me to chaperone a school field trip, but I'm not available for this reason. And sometimes they get upset about that. And most of the time they just accept it and go on. The other thing is that I'm really clear about where my um, like how much time I spend in certain places. And do I overcommit sometimes? Yeah, sure I do. You know, particularly as a woman of color who is like over serviced. That is something that's really easy to happen, and it's important that I'm willing and able to say no sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't feel like I can say no, and that sucks. You know, it just does. But ultimately, I try to say no when I can. And for my private practice, I limit the number of clients that I keep. Supervision is easy for me. I enjoy it. It's fun. And it doesn't require a whole lot of preparation in terms of like, maybe I need to review recordings or something like that, but it doesn't require me to have the same kind of energy that I need to bring to my clients. It's a different use of my energy, I think. Both are hard work for sure, but as some of you will know as you become supervisors, but it's just different, I think. So what I do there is I see clients on certain days of the week and I don't see them on other days. Like I have pretty hard lines about when I do and don't see clients. So that makes a big difference. And if I want to be on vacation or take a trip, I tell my clients, like, I'm going to be away and this is what the deal is. I'm actually traveling this summer. And I told my clients already, I was like, hey, like I'm going to be away for 6 weeks. My plan is to see everyone the week before I leave, and I will pick one day where I will see people, or you can decide to wait until I return. Or if you want, I can have someone to cover while I'm on vacation. Know that it's possible that you might like them better than me, and maybe you decide you want to stay with them, and that's okay. Like no harm, no foul. And most of them are like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. So you know, it's cool. Like communication is everything. So that's how I manage that. How do I manage being an educator? Well, this is probably the most challenging area. It just is what it is, mostly because the other things are interesting to me. I think if I were primarily focused on counselor education, that it might be a little easier, whatever that means. And ultimately, the work is never done. I told my mentor, probably, when did I tell her this? I don't know if she's gonna watch this video or not, but I adore her. Some of you will know who she is, and some of you will. I'm not gonna name her, but I think she's pretty awesome. And I told her, or I asked her one time, I want to say it was maybe my first semester as a counselor educator. I was like, why didn't you tell me that counselor educator meant fire extinguisher? She said, that is exactly what it is sometimes. And, you know, I think I experienced that as a doctoral student in the counselor education program, but not to the same extent as I do as a faculty member. I didn't realize how much we were shielded as doctoral students from some of the issues that people were experiencing in the master's program, in the doctoral program, just throughout the university, how much you get shielded from that. So even though part of it is a training experience, like there's also some protection from the doctoral faculty, which I really appreciate. So I might have gotten a little bit off track, but ultimately the idea is like understanding there's no such thing as work-life balance. I don't believe in that. I think that there are healthy rhythms of work and life, and that we decide where we want to spend our time. So one of the things that I learned while I was in the doctoral program actually is that I needed to like kind of change my schedule. So a lot of times what I would do is I would get up at, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would work until, 6 or 7 a.m. And then I would get up, do the things with my family, get the kid off to school, do whatever. And then I would go to campus and work from there. And so then I could go to bed early in the evening. So that is one of the things that really worked for me. I still haven't figured out what works for me right now. COVID like flipped my schedule on its head, and adjusting to my kid being back in public school, like face to face, has been challenging, and then comes with a different set of issues. So ultimately, it's just about deciding what's important to you and where you want to spend your time. I'm really fortunate that our programs at North Carolina Central are fully online and fully on campus, accredited by KCREP. So we have the option to offer our courses in either way. And in my case, all of my courses are offered online, just for today. Who knows, that might change tomorrow, but that gives me an opportunity to have a lot of flexibility in my schedule that I might not have in a different kind of counselor education setting. So those are some of the ways that I do it. I also am really big about a couple of things. One, scheduling time with my friends. I forget sometimes, but ultimately I will schedule, an hour walk with someone. We'll schedule just to walk and talk. And so we both are on our cell phones, walking through our neighborhoods or a park. We might be 10 states away from each other. And that is something that we do to, get time away from each other. I mean, a time away from work with each other, like some intentional time to connect. I think a lot of times we want to tune out, and sometimes I tune out by binge watching television. Most recently, it was the second season of Bridgerton, and it was
yes, I keep hearing about it.
That's pretty nice. I mean, the Duke isn't there, so but it was pretty nice. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's like scheduling time, like, okay, I'm going to go to a conference, but I'm going to attend conference events on day A, day B, and day C. I'm not going to attend conference events on day D, but I'm going to go and check out the city. So it's putting time in to do certain things. And then on the education side, one of the things that's really helpful to me is I will mark time in my schedule for grading. So whenever I set my syllabi, I also set my courses up for the entirety of the semester, which is not what a lot of online instructors do. They do it from week to week. I do it all at the beginning, like front load it. I mean, and it sucks. It's a hard 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the semester begins, but that gives me a lot of freedom once the semester begins to do what I need to do to take care of myself and to take care of my students. So I set it all up. And I can make adjustments if I need to. But one of the other things that I do is I say, if a major assignment is due today, then I have time blocked on my schedule tomorrow to score it. And that is one of the things that really helps with the time management piece. And it's really important to, when you set those times, to honor them. And if, say, you need to do something emergent, you need to schedule a doctor's appointment, and that's the only day that they can offer you, then you know that. And so then you split the time, or you move it to a different day where you have that. And that might mean you need to rearrange other things, and that's okay. I also color code my calendar. I won't show it to you because there's like private information on there, but that helps me decide when I see what color something is, that helps me decide if it's something I'm able to move or if it's something I'm not able to move. So like I use a color for courses, a color for like university requirements, a color for my home stuff. I also use black to block out days and times. I'm real serious about that. I use lavender for my self-care, green for clients, like different things like that. And that helps me determine if it's something that is movable or not, or that I can have a little bit of flexibility with. So those are some of the things that I do. I don't know if that's helpful. I know it was a lot.
I like that because I'm such a visual person. It helps. I think that I'm gonna try that one.
Yeah.
No, and Tasha, what I'm hearing is like a lot of, you're very intentional with the decisions that you make and how they're gonna show up in your life altogether. That's what I'm hearing. Which is so important when, like, in that decision-making process, as you kind of make decisions of like whether I say yes or no, can I say yes or no? And how will it show up in my everyday life? So I appreciate that. I'm gonna go with the next question that feels kind of connected to what you're naming, but what are some of the things that you wish you knew before working in private practice setting?
Everything.
Everything. Yes. All the things.
So some things that I wish I knew. I wish I had been asked this question a year ago. I think, what do I, Tasha Becton, wish I had known? I wish I had known that Simple Practice would change their pricing structure, but there was no way to predict that. Excuse
For
me.
those that don't know, Simple Practice is a, what do they call it? What's the word?
Electronic health record.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a records management system, and they changed their pricing structure. And they actually have changed it before, but this was a major change. And one of the things that they're doing now, actually was talking with one of my supervisees recently about potentially adding them to my practice. Like, I supervise them, they are in someone else's practice, but we have talked about them transitioning. And I was looking at like what it would cost me to do that, and I'm like, the way that they've changed it, it really makes it unmanageable for small group practices, which is why a lot of people have actually transitioned away from Simple Practice to other electronic health records, such as like Therapy Notes or Theranos or something like that. But so I wish I had known that. What else do I wish I had known? I don't know what else I think I wish I had known. Actually, maybe one thing is like estimated quarterly taxes. So like I heard people talking a lot about them and talking a lot about that. I saw your eyes get big. And I honestly was really surprised at the amount of money that I made in the first year. Like I just didn't anticipate that. And so had I known, I would have, you don't have to, you're not required to pay estimated quarterly taxes your first year, but had I known that I would earn as much money as I did, I probably would have done that. I'm fortunate in that I don't depend on my private practice for my income, and I don't like use my practice money. It goes to my business account and it stays there. I only use that account to pay for things for my business. So to pay for training, or to pay for like business related expenses or things like that. So it's not a big deal. Like I have enough money to pay the taxes. So that's not my concern, but I just wish I had a little bit more knowledge about like what I could have anticipated in terms of my income the first year and like what it might look like. When I think about other people though, I think one, I spent a lot of time researching and thinking about it and really contemplating about it. I'm a person that does that, which is not everyone's experience. So I don't feel like I was underprepared, but when I hear the questions or see the questions that other people ask, one of the things that comes up a lot is like understanding like different small things that they needed to take care of. And so I would say if you can get a mentor or a coach, then to definitely do that. You know, that is something that can serve you well as a private practitioner. So
like addressing things like definitely taxes.
mm-hmm.
It was that I agree with you. It was definitely one of those things that I heard about it, but never truly
Mm-hmm.
knew what it meant until like I had to, it was time for me to file my taxes.
Yeah.
The other small stuff, you're right. Like, okay, are you planning on like getting on board with any insurance panels?
Yeah.
Like you have to get an NPI number, and I had no idea how to do that. I had no idea what that was.
Yeah. And I've had my MPI for like decades, for a long time. And it's, I don't know, it's really interesting, you know, because I worked in public mental health. Like I had to have one, like that was one of the ways that they credential you with the managed care and the managed care organizations. MCOs now, there used to be local management entities. Anyway, the things have changed so much. So that is one of the things. Also thinking about little things like, for example, sometimes people will register for a free trial of Simple Practice, or they'll register for the free trial of Psychology Today or Theranos, but those things, the dates start as soon as you do that. So I think really it might be better, like if you, well, I don't want to tell the secret, but it maybe is better to wait to do that so that you can get the full benefit of the free period. If you do it well before you start your practice or before you launch or right when you start to think about it, then you may not serve yourself well in terms of covering some of your expenses. So I would say that it might be helpful to maybe think about delaying that just a little bit.
You mentioned something about like how long you've had your MPI number. Do you feel comfortable sharing with us a little bit about like how did you get to where you are and doing the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So like kind of like my career trajectory, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
So I'll leave off the year marks, though you could probably find them if you look hard enough online. But ultimately, I, like went to high school and then went to undergrad at UNCG. It was pretty awesome. And when I left UNCG, I worked full time for a few years before I decided to go back to graduate school. And then I went to graduate school at Wake Forest University, go Demon Deacons, and practiced for quite some time and had a kid, got married, not in that order. Got married and then got a kid, though really it doesn't matter what order you have them in. Live your life, it's yours, you get to decide. And then just kind of was reflecting on my life and deciding what I wanted to do when, because I had a lot of options, and ultimately decided that, I think I'm going to go get this doctorate. I've been wanting to do it and the timing seems right. I was really clear about not doing it earlier in my career because I wanted to be sure that I was doing it for me and not for my family or like another box to check, because I don't like to live my life like that. And I also knew that working in public mental health full time wasn't sustainable. And I didn't want to keep doing that. And it seemed like if I want to impact the field and I want us to have more Black and Brown counselors, that really what we need so much is representation. And that means having a faculty that looks like them. And so, I was like, hey, I want to do this. I want to become a faculty member and I can influence more people that way. And I work at a HBCU. So Central is my first HBCU. It's kind of nice to be in a place that, honors Black and Brown people in that way, Black people specifically. And that really in the graduate school, the ratios of like racial demographics are a little different than in the undergraduate school. And ultimately, like historically, we're still at HBCU and most of our undergraduates and our graduate students are Black people, but the ratios are just different in the graduate school and the undergraduate school. Y'all would have to look at the stats. I don't know what they are, but check it out.
With that, one of the questions that came in was, can you talk about being a Black woman in the field? And by field, I'm assuming they're like address like educator.
I was like, is that in counselor education? Because that is a lot more challenging than it is as a clinician. So as a clinician, like kind of like as a master's level clinician, it was fine. I think there are a lot more Black and Brown people at that level, particularly in this area, like in our geographic area. There are a lot of Black counselors. Part of that is because there are HBCUs that have counseling programs, counselor education programs, and part of it is just because we're very demographically diverse, racially diverse, and in this area of the country, in this area of the state. Mm-hmm. So I'll say that. I'm trying to think about specific challenges that I might have had as a Black woman counselor at the master's level. There are certainly, I can think about a couple of instances where maybe there were like microaggressions or macroaggressions, as the case sometimes is, that were related to my racial identity and my feminine identity, my femme identity. But I would say it's definitely been more of a challenge as a counselor educator. It was more of a challenge as a, and actually let me roll back. I had more problems as a Black woman counseling student at the master's level than I ever had as a Black woman counseling practitioner at the master's level. So I will say that publicly. I would say ultimately, like, for graduate students in general, for master students or doctoral students, women a lot of times have more challenges than men for a lot of reasons. People who are historically racially minoritized groups, who are from historically racially minoritized groups, tend to have more challenges than people who are not. And that is across graduate school, master's programs, doctoral programs. It is also true in the professorate. And I would say that my experience mirrors that.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel comfortable sharing, like, it doesn't have to be specific examples, but what made it harder for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the microaggressions, ultimately the microaggressions, the macroaggressions, the she's an angry Black woman. You know, like it's hard to learn how to advocate for yourself. And then when you do advocate for yourself, that you're perceived in a certain way, and it's really because someone else is uncomfortable. And, you know, one of the things that, well, I thought about something specific. I need to decide if that's what I want to say on this recorded interview or not. But I remember just different things, like perspective is everything, I'll say. And that a lot of times people will have a perception or an idea about someone or something, and their mere presence is perceived in a certain way, regardless of whether or not they have said anything or done anything. And that, I think, is really problematic and doesn't really serve us well. And I actually, this is the example I'll use law enforcement as an example. And I recognize that that's probably going to get us to one of the other questions, but this is kind of what I am thinking about. And I've actually brought this up before. So I won't name any of the players, but I'll kind of talk a little bit about the circumstances. So, you know, when in North Carolina, when a person is suicidal, there's a potential of threat to harm to themselves or to others. There's an involuntary commitment process, and that involves them being transported by law enforcement. Even in the voluntary commitment process, a person can be transported by law enforcement. And in the Vacc clinic, you know, there's a set of procedures by which, when there's a potential for a person to need to be hospitalized, that you follow, and part of that includes law enforcement, just because of the standards of transportation for the mentally ill or the people that are experiencing suicidal ideation, or homicidal ideation in the state of North Carolina. Like, that's just a part of the regulations. And so there was a situation where someone was transported or being transported, and there was some confusion or a misunderstanding about whatever was going on between the people that were working in the clinic that day and law enforcement and the family of this person that needed to be transported. But anyway, the person got to where they needed to go. Everything was everything. Well, the next day, some of the UNCG police officers came by the clinic to talk to one of the counselors that was involved. It might not have been the next day. It might have been a couple of days later. But anyway, the point is they were there. And the way people reacted to the law enforcement officers was really interesting to me to watch. Like, they were there, you know, like campus police are very friendly. For the most part, like they have a very community-oriented policing philosophy. Like, they're there to support the community, to learn, to do whatever. And they just kind of wanted to talk about like kind of some procedural things and understand what expectations were. They wanted to catch up with the counselor that was involved in this particular case. So they were there, and people saw them, and they were kind of like, looking and watching, and like, who are they looking for? Well, they're looking for Sandra. Well, why are they looking for her? And it's like, why is there an assumption that something is bad or that something is wrong? Like, they haven't said a word. You saw them and you had a reaction to them. And now you're having a whole lot of thoughts going on, and you're making a lot of assumptions, and you're projecting some ideas onto that based on your own ideas or your own experiences. And that is unfair. And I think that was really parallel to a lot of my own experience, that like my mere presence, like people would react to for whatever reason, because of whatever their personal stuff was that was going on with them. And I don't think that is anything that serves any of us, that serves any of us well. And then some people would make an argument, well, people react to police for different reasons, X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And in this case, like the person that was having the reaction that is the most memorable to me is not a person that I would expect to be having those sorts of reactions to law enforcement. Those were really judgments. And that's the way that I perceive them. I'm pretty confident in that to this day. And maybe that person will challenge me and they'll say, it wasn't that, it was something different than that. But,
yeah, we all hold our own biases.
Yes.
And some of that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
We all do hold biases. And I think it's really important to acknowledge them. And when we refuse to do that, that's when we really do the profession a disservice. And that means counselor education or counseling or otherwise. And so, I think what I'll add is that ultimately, we were talking about it a different day. I think this person I don't remember if they asked me about it that same day or later, but we were just kind of talking about it, and I challenged them. And they were just like, well, yeah, like maybe I guess I could see that. And then they were also kind of dismissive of it. And I'm like, so not only are you judging, but you're now dismissing like this clear observation, like a behavioral observation, not a judgment. So I would encourage people not to do that. And so I might have gotten a little bit off track, but the idea is that sometimes people make assumptions, like they see me, they see I'm a Black woman, I'm very powerful. I walk into a room and people pay attention. Part of that might be because I'm not a small person, and another part of that is like what is often kind of like is like my presence. I had a different word that I was going to use for that, but I decided to modify that a little bit. So it's my presence, and that it's a lot for some people to handle, particularly if they are a person who does not have a substantial presence, like whatever that means. And that really people's own feelings about themselves are what can often lead to judgments of other people. So
what a beautiful reminder for people to make sure you're doing your own work.
Yeah.
Make sure you're doing your own work. And you're right, like that does like bring us to the next question that someone submitted, which was, I'm wondering about your work with first responders and being a Black woman.
Yeah.
Do you ever get backlash, considering how many, so many people don't want anything to do with police after, I guess they're finally addressing police brutality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I really operate on a people first mentality. I'm a person before I'm a counselor. People are people before they're law enforcement officers. People are people before they're other types of first responders. So that's kind of my immediate response to that. I wish whoever asked that question were here for us to have a real direct conversation about it. But I think, again, like people make assumptions based on things that they see in the media, things that they see in the fictional media, whether or not those things are based on real life events, and that it's really important for us to identify exceptions and recognize the humanity of all people and all things. The question of, do I ever get any backlash? I mean, I guess it depends on what you call backlash, but I'm not worried about what other people think about me. Not today. If you had asked me at a different point in my career what my experience was, then I might have had a different response to that question. And, I was thinking about someone that I worked with recently. I'm not working with a person anymore, but a law enforcement officer in counseling. And so much of what the public is saying is, oh, well, these law enforcement officers need to be required to get counseling and X, Y, Z and ABC. Well, if y'all want to require them to get counseling, you can't get mad at counselors for seeing them. Like both of the things can't happen. Are there dialectics? Like, can two things be true at the same time? Yes. But like, why would I get backlash for seeing a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, an EMT, when really the public is saying, oh, well, these people need to be evaluated and they need to get counseling. And when they say these people, they're othering them and saying like, oh, well, they're different than us. They must have a different attitude or a different kind of life, or I can't believe they would do this or that. And I'm just like, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Honor what your own biases are, what your experiences are. And, I would encourage people to explore whatever their ideas are about that before they start to make judgments about it. So, and if people want to ask me follow-up questions, like you're welcome to reach out to me directly, about that. We can talk about it, but, I'm not worried about it. And I'm not a person who is, I'm very pro-police. I will say that. In fact, very much pro-police. So you're not going to hear any anti-police rhetoric from me. I think police brutality, I don't know, I maybe kind of have some feelings about that language. And I also would like to say a couple of things that really, from my perspective, the media is sensationalist. I want to say for sure that one is too many. Like, I'm very clear about that. One is too many, two is way too many, so I'll be really clear about that. But I want to think about this like planes. Like there are planes going back and forth across the world every day, hundreds of them, probably thousands. The only ones we hear about are the ones that crash. And there's a similar thing for police interactions. And there are way more police interactions in any day than there are planes flying around. And the police interactions that we hear the most about are the ones that are going to get clicks, that are going to get media attention. there's been a trend, at least locally anyway, to show more about positive law enforcement interactions, positive public safety interactions. And so that is happening. And again, I'll say, one less than positive interaction is too many. And like, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, so that's just my perspective on that. And maybe that sounds cryptic, but that's, kind of my experience. But everyone deserves to be able to see a counselor that doesn't judge them. Counseling is for everyone. And when we recognize that we're judging certain people or groups, and that there's some work that we need to do around that.
And I can see how it very much gets into the, when we're addressing the code of ethics.
Yeah.
As counselors, we abide by. So it also made me think about that.
Yeah, all of that, all of it.
Okay, I'm gonna make a little bit of a switch.
Okay.
Or maybe not so much, but someone was asking about brain spotting. So they said, hear a little bit about the steps, about the steps to become trained in brain spotting. Also, I have heard a little about it, but would love to know more. So what exactly is brain spotting?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's see if I can talk about this on the fly. So basically, brain spotting is based on the premise that where you look affects how you feel. And so when I saw your email that had that question, I was like, oh, maybe we'll be able to do like a brief demonstration exercise, but there aren't people here to do that. But for people that are listening, I'll invite you to do a couple of things. Just think about something that you get really excited about. We'll use excitement so that in case anyone's, in a place, something that you get happy about. Maybe it's the last time you had some ice cream from Yum Yums, or maybe it's like a favorite dinner that you have, like that feeling that you get when you think about that. And if you could pay attention to your body, like notice your body sensations. Maybe you do a body scan from your head, the follicles of your hair all the way, down your skin, down all your arms and legs, digits, your phalanges and tarsals and metatarsals and all of that. And notice where you're experiencing that happiness or joy or excitement, like whatever the emotion was, right? So you recognize that. That is maybe the spot where you have the most access to that feeling. I'll invite you to do a couple of things. You can do this with your eyes open or with your eyes closed, but let your eyeballs go all the way to one side. So like I'm letting my eyes go over there. How much access do I have in my body to that spot where I feel joy or excitement or happiness? And then I will let my eyes go straight ahead. And then notice there, how much access do I have to the place in my body where I feel joy or excitement or happiness? And then I'll let my eyes go all the way to the other direction. And then note how much access do I have to that experience of joy or happiness or excitement. And it looks like you're doing it, Melissa. What did you notice?
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say it was mostly in the center.
Okay, so mostly in the center. So once you get to that center spot, right, you'll let your eyes go a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right to see if one of them gets you closer to getting to that spot where you're joyful or excited or happy.
I would say for me, like a closer to the center still, like more towards to the left.
Okay. And then you can try going a little bit up from there and a little bit down from there to see if there's a spot that even gets you more access.
I'd say like higher up.
Okay. Yeah. And so we'll just stay there for like 20 seconds and see what you notice or observe. Oh, the bird is like all in your business. Okay. So it's been about 20 seconds. Did you notice anything?
Notice my cheeks.
Your cheeks?
I noticed my cheeks like wanting to just like, as I like focus on a specific memory, I went to a memory with ice cream at Yum Yums.
I love Yum Yums.
Went with my cohorts recently after class, and it just, I noticed myself, just my cheeks just immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. That's awesome. And so, I don't want us to like spend a whole lot of time there, but the idea is that where the eye position corresponds to like access to a memory or something like that. And what I liken it to is you're ever like trying to tell a story and you're like, hang on, like I'm trying to replay it. And you look around and you're like, okay, wait, it's right here. And like when you look in a certain spot, you're like, okay, I remember all the things and I can replay this whole conversation we had and Melissa said and Tasha said or whatever. Same kind of thing. A lot of us are doing it on a regular basis, but brain spotting is more intentional with a person who can be with you while you work through that experience. So it can work on really positive experiences. I hate to use those positive and negative words, but it can work on experiences that we desire to have, and we can work toward expanding those to amplify them. It can work on traumatic experiences that we have. And, you know, brain spotting is pretty new of the brain-based therapies. It's actually kind of cutting edge in terms of all of it. And it was based on or developed from EMDR, actually. So a lot of people know a lot more about EMDR, this idea of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Let me actually go backwards just a little bit. So I'll press pause, rewind, and go back to when we're getting access to those memories. So like we're doing that on a regular basis. And so when you work with a brain spotting therapist, they're intentional about trying to help you find a spot where you have access to a felt body experience that lets you begin to think through, process, and reprocess whatever that memory experience is in a different way. It gets access to a trauma capsule or to a memory capsule, to a file cabinet, to a drawer, to that closet in your house that no one wants to look in, that drawer in the kitchen that has all the things in it. You know, it's the thing that unlocks it so that you can explore what's in there. So that's one of the ways that I like to think about it. So we'll go forward. We'll go forward just a little bit and start to talk about EMDR. So with EMDR now, we have all kinds of really cool gadgets, like including like, I like got my things all mixed up here. So this is kind of my little thing that I can turn on my buzzers or whatever. But like with EMDR, a lot of times people use tappers. So these little guys that vibrate alternating. There's also the light bar. So the light goes across and across. If you watch the Fosters, you might have seen that with one of the characters in the Fosters. The light bar was kind of one of the earlier bilateral stimulation items. The tappers are newer, but prior to that, EMDR would have the therapist kind of like do this thing side to side. Like when I first learned about EMDR, that was one of the things that happened. So David Grand, who is the founder, the developer of brain spotting, was an EMDR trained person, and he was using EMDR with all of his clients. He then developed natural flow EMDR is what he called it. And so it was EMDR that had kind of the bilateral stimulation, but without the stopping, without the checking, without the constant assessing of the SUDS or reevaluating. And it just had a lot more freedom, and it let him focus more on the relationship with the client and less on the protocol. As he was doing that, one of the things that he noticed with a figure skater is that he was kind of doing this side to side thing. And he got to a point and he noticed that something happened with her eyes. They started to wobble a little bit. And he's like, hey, something's there. So instead of me moving side to side, I'm just going to stop right here and let the skater, the figure skater, focus there and see what happens. And what happened was she started to share things that she hadn't shared before. She started to work through some experience that she hadn't had before, that she had not done before in counseling. And then she went out onto the figure skating rink. And one of the things she had been having trouble with, a particular skill, she was able to now do that skill. And he was like, hey, there's something to this. Like, let's continue to explore it. And, you know, here we are a decade or so more later, probably maybe 2 decades at this point later, and thousands of people trained in brain spotting and experimenting with brain spotting in their therapy practices. And it seems like it works for people. And it's a growing modality with a growing body of literature. I really hope to see a lot more about it soon. I might have gotten a little bit off track there. So if you want to help me.
No, you did, because the question, like, people want to know more about brain spotting. You're right. I think we get to hear a lot more often about like EMDR, especially when we're in school. And so, and I am seeing more and more people being curious about brain spotting. So I think you did a beautiful job, like tapping into that as well, and demonstrating it. And like, I'm assuming like, oh, okay. So one of the questions was how do you become trained?
Yeah,
And
sure. I can talk about how you become trained in brain spotting. So brain spotting has several different training phases. So there's like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, master class. There are lots of specialty trainings. The bottom line for what you need for brain spotting training to be able to use it in your practice is ultimately you need to follow the ethical standards of practice, which say that you get, training or education on a particular modality before you begin to use it. So theoretically, you could go out and read the brain spotting book and you might have enough information. I think it's probably best to get phase 1 training at minimum. And that's where you learn the foundations of brain spotting. You learn about inside window brain spotting, outside window brain spotting, gaze spotting. So choosing a spot based on your gaze, G-A-Z-E, gaze, as well as resource spotting. And that resource spotting is when we still work on something that we're activated about, but instead of doing that from a place of activation, we do it from a place that's more resourced in our body so that we are not maybe flooded as much. The way that you get training is go to brainspotting.com and you can find out about all of the trainings there. There are some trainings that are offered that are focused and center the experiences of BIPOC people, and they are for everyone. And there are also some BIPOC affinity space training. So they are not open to people who do not identify as BIPOC, and that's an opportunity for people to get the training and share experiences in a way that feels a little bit more like familiar and like their community. So that's kind of the bottom line on that. And in terms of certification for brain spotting, you need to have completed both the phase 1 training and the phase 2 training to pursue certification, and you have to document 50 brain spotting sessions, 50 hours of sessions utilizing brain spotting, and have a minimum, not a maximum, but a minimum of 6 brain spotting consultation sessions with an approved brain spotting consultant. And the consultant can make a recommendation for you to have more consultation sessions, just depending on your skill level.
You're a consultant?
I am.
So if students are looking to kind of connect with you, what do you think would be, and I'm going to ask one more question too, but like, I guess this is an opportunity for me to also ask, like, so if they want to more about like the possibility of consulting with you, what would be, how could they reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. So you can always reach me at my practice. So warfaircounseling.com, and you'll note that it's WARFAIR, fair. Not like it's like being fair, fighting fair, being fair in love and war, etc. War and peace. Not warfare like FARE, because we ain't with that. No. The way to fight fair is to take good care of yourself. Yeah. So warfaircounseling.com. You can also reach me on my practice phone number. So that's 336-422-6159, or Tasha at warfaircounseling.com.
And I'll make sure to include that again whenever I upload the video. One more question, kind of two, because I'm aware of time too. So like in relation to addictions work, do you think getting an LCAS is important, especially for being marketable with jobs opportunities? And I may ask you about getting your NCC as well.
Yeah. So for both of them, it depends. I'll say it all depends on what you want to do. So I am a person that maintains both of those. I maintain both my National Certified Counselor credential and my Licensed Clinical Addiction Specialist credential. It really depends on what work you want to do, where you plan to work, what your long-term intentions are. If you are a person who is planning to become a counselor educator, who is a counselor educator in training, who plans to take that path, absolutely maintain your NCC. If you have the opportunity to become an addiction specialist, absolutely do it. It will serve you well. If you are a practitioner, it's probably a good idea, but I don't know that having an NCC or not having an NCC is going to be the end all be all. It's a clear mark of professional identity, and it can set you apart in some settings. And there are some places that will prefer people be NCCs, but if you decide you want to be an NCMHCE, then go for it, And if you decide, I don't want to do that, you can make that decision, and it might make it a little bit more challenging for you to get your test scores if you need to send them to a credentialing organization. So that's something to think about. As far as addictions, I want to be really clear that all of you are going to take an addictions course, and you will have enough information to go out and begin to do work in addictions. I think a lot of people have a real misunderstanding that they can only do addictions work if they have specialized in addictions. And I'm really clear about the scope of practice for professional counselors, that includes a broad range of issues, and that we are counselors first and we are specialists second. I'm very clear about that. Other people might have different perspectives, and that's a decision that you get to make for your own life. But for me, I am a counselor first and I'm addiction specialist after that. I don't even know that I would call that my primary specialty, but here we are. So can it make you more marketable? Can it increase your job opportunities? Absolutely, it can. If you're a master's student post-graduation, or even if you're a doctoral student post-graduation, I would say if you can work on both licenses at the same time, then absolutely do it. Find a supervisor who can do both of those things. I supervise for both clinical mental health counseling as well as addictions counseling. And, you might find a social work supervisor that does both of those things, or a marriage and family therapy supervisor that does both of those things. Like if you're a person that's, pursuing couples and family counseling, for example. So I would say if you're interested in it, do it. If you are certain that that's a route that you want to take, I would encourage you to take some of the addictions counseling courses through the UNC consortium, or the, kind of the service agreements between the universities. You could take those at North Carolina A&T, or at East Carolina University, or UNC Charlotte, or even at North Carolina Central. And that would give you an opportunity to use your financial aid toward the cost of the courses and get what you need. And then I just thought of something that was unrelated to that question, but I want to make sure I answered all of that before we go on. Okay, so I'll add the other thing. If you're a person that's interested in brain spotting and you are wanting, you could take courses through the consortium. I'm actually offering at North Carolina Central this summer, in first summer session, a brain-based therapies course that includes the phase 1 brain spotting training. So if you're taking a look at this video and you're interested in that, like, holler, find out what you need to do to register. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you were talking about addictions, and it made me think about a lot of times people think that even if they don't specialize in addictions work, that they're just not going to have to address that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's a thing everywhere all the time. School counseling, whatever. You're like, school counselors are like, oh, I'm not going to deal with that. And I'm like, yes, you will deal with it, because I'm going to tell you, before these people came to me as adults, they were using in your middle school, they were using in your elementary school, they were using in your high school. It was happening. If they weren't using, their parents were, and it was causing problems for them in the academic environment. So you really need to fully understand it. I'm gonna get on a soapbox for just a minute here.
Go for it.
I was talking with a professional colleague this morning who's a school counselor educator, and one of the things we were talking about was this move that the NCB LCMHC is trying to make toward making a specific clinical practice requirement in the master's program for people to move towards licensure. And it seems like, I don't know if it is for sure, it seems like a way to block school counselors from getting licensed as clinical mental health counselors in North Carolina, which I got beef with. It also seems like a way to block career counselors, and I got beef with that too. Professional counselors are what they are. So I would say, go take a look at the proposed rule changes and make whatever advocacy moves you feel like you need to make. But a couple of things I want to say. One of the things we were talking about was whether all of the school counseling programs require the school counselors to take a diagnosis course or an addictions course, or both. And really, I think both should be required, and this is why. School counselors write IEPs, they write 504 plans, and they are interacting with students on a regular basis that have a broad variety of issues. School counselors are constantly, hosting small groups, or teaching DBT skills, or teaching CBT skills, or doing psychoeducation. It's not all kind of foundational social emotional learning. Some of it is like about, and all of those things are real issues, but some of the things that school counselors do are about more real clinical issues in the school setting. And it's important to have a foundational understanding of those things so that you can be successful as a school counselor in that role. The other thing that I'll add is with regards to addictions, back to what I said before, kids are using in elementary school, they're using in middle school, they're using in high school. And if you're going to be a school counselor who's operating a prevention program in your school setting, then you need to understand about those things. So yeah, you need to take addictions courses. And yes, you need to understand addiction. And yes, you're going to interact with it. And yes, you're going to have parents or caregivers of your students who are drinking or using or having sex addiction or pornography addiction or gambling addiction in the home. And it's going to be impacting your students in the school setting in a way that you need to understand what is going on there. So yes, the courses are necessary. And yes, you are going to be prepared for clinical practice, whether you practice in a school counseling setting or you become a career counselor or you get your degree and you go do academic advising or whatever, working housing and residence life in a university setting. All of it is still relevant. And I really am passionate about the role of the professional counselor and what we do. And that all of us are prepared for that, and that the counselor education program, our role, our goal is to provide the foundations in the profession. The direct practice stuff is for field experience and it's for your work experience after. We lay the foundation. The specialty stuff, the more advanced stuff is for later. You know, like this is like just the basics. So anyway, I'm gonna step off.
I feel like a bobblehead because I was just like, yes, yes.
Listen,
Yes,
y'all gonna get me with the neck rolls or something up in here, and I don't even roll like that. But listen, this is something that I feel I got some feelings about.
I love it. I love it. I could hear it in your voice and your passion for it. Okay, questions, but we're out of time, so we'll leave it here.
What was the question though?
The question was like, no, that was our last question. But for me, it was like in kind of expanding with like students that a lot of times, like I noticed a hesitancy of like, well, I'm not going to need this. And I'm like,
oh, you need it.
Yeah, let me do it. Yeah. Like even I do a lot of work with eating disorders, like, and seeing the many ways in which that comes up, like whether it be or if if I don't know, an individual is coming in and they're having relationship problems due to something related, just so much. And on a note about like the school counselors, for a lot of students, the school counselor is the first person that
it's the only counselor they're gonna see in their whole life.
Yes, exactly.
Come on, y'all. This is not hard. It's not.
Thank you.
Anyway,
thank
you.
So
that's my story. Like, study all the things, be a strong generalist before you become a specialist. And really, my personal belief is that master's programs should be designed to help people become strong generalists and introduce specialties.
I was gonna, so my last question for you, and it's a question that I'm ending with everybody, is like, so if you had one thing that if you could go back in time when you started doing some of this work, like what would be one thing that you would say to younger Tasha?
Yeah, one thing to younger me or to younger professionals in general?
Ooh, maybe both if you feel open to it.
So I think really just slow down to people in general. Like I think a lot of times people want to go through it fast. And I think that's my experience with our students at Central, is that they are just like, what do I need to do to get through this? That this is not a checkbox. It's not a box to check. We're talking about real people and real lives and real problems. And to younger me, it took me a while to learn this, and I had to learn it over and over and over and over and over, but like everybody's not for you. Find your people. Yeah. So there it is. Find your people, y'all.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your time so much and you sharing your wisdom with us.
You're welcome.
One more time. So if people want to reach out to you, ask you any follow-up questions, consult, what would be the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, sure. So for like kind of private practice, like consultation, supervision, those sorts of things, you can reach me in my practice. So tasha@warfarecounseling.com. That's my email address there, or warfarecounseling.com is the address to my practice. If you are wanting to ask me questions about going into the professorate or like counselor education, more things like that, you can actually reach me at Central. That's latasha.becton@nccu.edu.
Thank you so much, Tasha.
You're very welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all. Have a great day.